Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of the trx4m bearing install and some brass goodies and some high trail or aluminum high clearance links. This is the reassembly of the putting the axles and diffs back in, installing the links. Right now I'm putting in the rear upper links, I believe is what it is. By the way, I did cut it off the camera. Those links the pivot balls are all separate and they're held in by O-rings on each side of the pivot ball. The pivot balls are brass to give it a little bit of weight down lower. As you can see in the video, when my hands aren't in the way, this is the reinstallment of the rear links. And just in case you have any questions, when you do a set of high clearance links, the shorter part from the bend to the pivot ball, the shorter part goes to the rear. As anybody that's been in the hobby very long knows, aftermarket parts, if they come with any directions, they're not very good, but most aftermarket parts don't have any directions. Most of them aren't that hard to figure out, but some of them can be a little nerve-wracking. But as far as the links go, they're pretty simple to figure out. But in the video here, I'm just getting all the links put back in. I install all the links back on the center skid where they pivot from first, and then get to the axles. And that looks like I'm talking in the video, which I was, but had a lot of background noise, and I did a lot of cuts on this video, so that's why I'm having to do this voiceover. But hopefully I get to where I don't have to do these voiceovers. I can just let the video play, but I also had to shorten it up too. It was about 39 minutes. This part 2 here of reassembling the chassis, or reassembling the axles and drive lines and all back in the chassis with the 4 links. Like I said in my part 1 video, one of these times I'm going to figure out how to do some music, so there'll be some background music playing. I also have to figure out what I'm allowed to play without getting into any kind of copyright problems. I'm not trying to get into any of that. Just trying to have fun in the hobby I love and maybe help some people learn a few things. So far in the video, I've just been installing the links in the one end. They fit a little snug, the pivot balls. One thing about the plastic parts, they slide back together pretty easy when you're dealing with the brass and aluminum or any kind of metal. The metal doesn't give any at all, but so if the tolerances are tight, you got to get it at the right sweet spot to slide together. And as I said in my first video, if you watched the first video, anytime you're putting screws into metal, where they're screwing into some sort of metal, aluminum, brass, steel, it's always good to put a little bit of blue Loctite. They will loosen up. It has happened to me. So just a little pointer for the newbies that aren't that informed on the hobby. A little blue Loctite will save you a lot of headaches, especially when you're out on the trails playing around, or out in the field playing, or in a parking lot if you're playing with an on-road vehicle. It's always a good idea to carry some extra screws and stuff with you. Usually if I go anywhere I do have a trailer that I haul all my RC stuff in, and I have parts and tools and stuff in it. But if I go anywhere and I'm just taking a few cars, I do have a toolbox that I carry that has a assortment of screws and stuff in it, and works out pretty well. I know there's not a lot going on, or there's a lot going on in the video, but I'm not doing a lot of talking. There's not a lot to say, but the links go together pretty much like they come out. Here I'm reinstalling the front axle. I found it to be a lot easier to put with this thing being so small, put the upper links in first, then you can pivot it around and get the driveline, two sections of the driveline back together. Most of the time they only go together one way, so if you're trying to put it together and it doesn't seem to be sliding, rotate one end or the other until you feel it slide together. Then once you get the driveline all back in, hook your bottom links. Don't do like I did the first time. I put my screw back in the bottom links without putting the shock on. On the trx4m, the lower link screw is also the shock screw. It goes through the shock into the lower link and the axle housing to hold everything together. Here I think I'm trying to fight the driveline back together. It's not that it's a big fight, it's just small, and the space is small, and I have big fingers, big hands, so can get a little tight sometimes, but I've always been able to manage with the little parts. Also, too, just want to also say that I'm not paid or sponsored in any of these videos. So all the stuff that you see, I bought and paid for with my own money, and just doing the videos to show you how to give some people that may need to see how to do it, or a little push to get started. It's not that hard. You don't really have to have too much mechanical ability. This is actually a good way to learn. If you're a younger person, start wrenching on these little cars, and when you get older you can wrench on the big ones and save yourself a ton of money. But that's what I try to teach my kids. Sorry about all the babbling. I'm just trying to fill in the quiet space. But here I'm putting the lower link screws in through the shock, like I said earlier, into the lower link and into the axle housing to hold everything together. Sorry about the angles. This is the only camera I have at this point in time, and working on a better space to do these videos where I have be able to put the camera in a better position to see better. But for right now, this is just going to have to do, and this kind of was a last minute idea to video this. Kind of wish I'd have started a long time ago. I'd have a mess of videos and content if I had recorded all the stuff I've done over all the years. And of course some of it will be out of date by now, because the RC world comes out with stuff almost as fast as computers. And that's the front end all back together. As you can see, just press the axles, make sure all your suspension and everything moves without any binding. You want everything to be free. Here I'm putting replace the factory plastic tie rod bar with a brass tie rod bar, and I didn't cut this part out because I kind of wanted y'all to see these little pivot balls, they're not brass on this particular brass piece, they're just steel, but they do go in the same way. You got a rubber O-ring on each side. Put the O-ring on one side, slide it through, and then put the O-ring on the other side, and it holds it all together. Hopefully some of this footage is useful for people watching, and can be entertaining, I guess, because especially if you would have seen what the stuff I cut out, some of it could have been some blooper reels, but cut it out for the sake of keeping it short and sweet and getting the point across. And like I said, I will be having more content. As anything, it will get better. The more I do, the better it'll get. I learn little things to do and not to do. Like, for one, don't make a video sitting in your living room with your wife and kids sitting on the couch watching TV and your dog's barking in the background. So that was one thing I learned. But like I said, I had to cut some out and do this voiceover to tell a little bit about what was going on in the video. And the front tie rod is brass, and the knuckles I replaced on the truck on the earlier video. If you watched the earlier video, you'll know about the brass knuckles on the front axle. But the hole tolerances are pretty tight, so you have to have everything lined up just perfect to get the screws in. That's what I was fighting with there. Both sides give me a little bit of a fit, and I did cut a lot of it out because it was giving me a hard time. But also, this was filmed, started at like around 9 o'clock, filmed all the way up until after midnight. Just wanted to get it knocked out. Once I get started on something, I was tired in part of it, and then I get my second wind and get going again. But here I'm finishing up the tie rod, or actually got the one side done, so get this other side back in. Like I said, it's probably going to give me a little bit of a fit too. I might should have edited it a little bit more, but tried to leave some footage where you can actually see something where my hands aren't in the way, like I said. I've thought many times about doing videos, just never have done it, and with the influence of a few friends telling me to do things, you know, that I want to do instead of thinking about doing them. So here we go. Like I said in my other video, I've been in this hobby for 30 plus years. I don't know everything about the hobby. I know a pretty good bit about it, about the stuff I mess with anyway. Used to could tell you a whole lot when I was younger about the old Associated RC10s, because that's what me and my uncle used to mess with. The front's all done now, so now we're moving on to the rear. Like I said, you can see kind of in the video, I got the rear lower links propped up out of the way, working on putting the upper links on the housing. And after I get the upper links all screwed in, the upper links on the TRX4 front and rear just have one screw, so you have to get both links in, get the screw through both of them. And here I'm putting the driveline yoke on the I didn't explain it on the front one when I was putting the front one back on. The shorter driveline goes to the front, which of course if you take it apart and pay attention you'll know that, but just in case you're watching this video to try to figure something out, that might help you. The longer shaft goes to the rear. The bigger shaft that slides over the outer shaft, in my experience, usually goes to the rear. The inner shaft goes to the front. Some vehicles have a 3-piece drive shaft, so they have a big shaft on the front, big shaft on the rear, and the inner shaft's in the middle. The TRX4 full-size ones have shafts like that. As far as the drive shafts go, though, I don't really think it matters which way you put them in, as long as there's no clearance issues. But the way these came out, the bigger part of the shaft went to the rear, or towards the axles, and the inner part that slides in goes toward the transmission. But there's everything back together, tested out, or pressed down by hand to make sure everything's free, no binding. Here I'm running my motor wire back through the battery tray. Comes up from the front, goes through the battery tray and back down, and then comes back up on the back side, and there's a little clip on the back of the battery tray that the wires slide into. Then pretty much self-explanatory, but you plug the motor back into the motor slot on the control module. The TRX4M's, the blue thing that you see me plugging into, is the ESC and receiver all in one. I believe they call it electronic control module, but typically in the RC world you have a receiver and then you have a ESC that are two separate things. But I guess to keep the space compact as small as they could, they did it all in one, which was good. It's a pretty good little rig. Everything Traxxas that I've ever had with Traxxas, I've never had a problem out of. It's always been good stuff. There's other ones that make good stuff too. I have had a few 124 scales. I believe one of them was an axial. I think I give it to a little boy camping one time. That's one thing about me. If I'm out somewhere and my kids meet somebody and they seem like a good kid or something, I've been known to give away an RC here and there, just to make the kids, give them a little joy. You never know what kids are going through in their mind, but give them a little joy and also get them into the hobby. Get them started. You know, they say anything in this world, if you don't start the younger generation, then everything will die off. So I know my kids love it. They enjoy it. My two sons, they're a little older now, so they're into driving their own vehicles and doing their own thing. And my girls, they love playing with the RCs with me. They're not quite old enough to work on them yet, but they are willing to learn. They have asked me before how to do things, and I show them, and they learn how to do them and stuff like that. So I think all I did there was just run all the wires. Actually, I mounted the front servo back. Shoot, I didn't even tell y'all what I was doing in that, running my mouth about everything else. But all I did was mount the front servo back with the two screws, hold the servo in, and lined up the servo horn and put the screw back in the servo horn. Then I run the wire for the servo back through. That's what I'm doing now, running the wire back through the battery tray, just like the motor wire. and then it plugs into the servo hole, of course. Pretty much it's all back together now except for the wheels and tires. The battery strap, putting the battery strap back on the battery box, it just hooks on one side, and then when you put your battery in, you hook it on the other. Self-explanatory, but it's not what the video is about, so, but just explaining. In just a few minutes, or just less than a few minutes, there's only a few minutes left in the video. Here we go. I put the wheels back on the right side, then I cut out putting the left side on because it's the same process, just on the opposite side. And once I get the wheels back on, I get it all set down on the wheels, put the battery back in. As of the time of this editing this video, I have not tested the truck as far as to see what kind of difference all the brass goodies made on the crawling with the truck, but they did add a good bit of weight to it. As I was putting the battery charger back, I'll just charge my battery while I was working on it, so everything's nice and fresh. And I do test it out off camera before I go to bed, just to make sure everything's working right and everything like that. So then in a minute I'll show underneath of it some of the goodies I put on it. The brass center skid, that's the rear differential cover, front differential covers. The aluminum links I put on with the brass pivot balls. The front has the C-hubs brass, and the knuckles are brass, and the front differential cover, and the cross tie rod bar. But if you enjoyed the video, give me a like, subscribe. They will get better, like I said, just starting out. But have a good day, and always remember, have fun RCing.